Happy and Healthy.
This is a series aimed at providing older adults with resources on health, fitness, finances, and other services.
Happy and Healthy.
Hello, and welcome today to our program on TBCN's Happy and Healthy series, where older adults and their families can get useful information about resources available to them. Today's program is about giving advice to seniors on how to re-enter the labor force. And our guests today are Professor Marvin Karlin from the Department of Management at the University of South Florida, and Bob Yakubisin, who's the project director for SCSEP, which is with the AARP Foundation, and he's going to explain that for us as we go further into the program. I'd like to welcome you both to the program today. My name is Roy Kaplan. I'll be your host, and we're going to raise some interesting issues that I think will be of use and information on re-entering the labor force, maybe doing your resume in a way that might be more appealing, some of the obstacles that people might encounter and how to overcome them. I wanted to ask Dr. Karlin first, though, a real fundamental question, and that is, should people retire, or what happens to them when they retire? And I know he's very opinionated about this. We've known each other for many years, and he has some definite ideas about this whole thing.
Well, thanks. I appreciate it, Roy. It's certainly easier to stay into the in the job market than to try to get back in, especially as one ages. There are certain kind of occupations where I believe when you hit retirement age, whatever that means, especially with hard labor, physical jobs, or jobs that have been very taxing, that retirement is appropriate. But we have to remember that life expectancy has dramatically increased. They talk about, I myself looked at 65, had an 18-year life expectancy. That's 83. So if I was to retire at 65, the question is, what am I going to do for 18 years? A majority of Americans now say they're more afraid of outliving their money than they are of death. So one thing I would suggest is that before you retire, or thinking of retirement, is to ask yourself, is my work enjoyable to me? Do I enjoy what I'm doing? Is there something I'd rather be doing? And if the answer is no, and if you're in good health, and as far as your feelings about your work, I see no reason to leave. Certainly, work is a lot of our psychological well-being, and I think I used to train pilots for many years, and they talk about hitting the wall. They'd have to retire at 60, and they'd be dead they're by 62 to 63 because they were suddenly left with nothing, and they weren't prepared for retirement. So I'd like people to stay and work if they like to work. I don't think age should be a barrier.
That's a good response, and I would agree with you, because a lot of my career as a sociologist, I spent in an area called sociology of work, the meaning of work to people. And work is really what defines us in this society. And when you meet somebody, basically the first thing you ask them, besides their name, is, what do you do? There are reasons why you do that, and we won't get to all of them, but that is how you're defined. You're who you are. And when you lose your work, you start losing a part of you, your identity. But I think the question is, if people are unhappy with what they do, then maybe they could start coming up with a bucket list or something. But it is difficult to give up who you are, who you've been for all those years. I know, I'm an educator, and I know many people who were teachers or administrators in the educational system. And they leave, they're in the drop program, and then they're in their early 50s, and they, theoretically, they have 30 or 40 years to go, and they don't know what to do with themselves. Now, if you're really unhappy, maybe you should use your noodle a little bit and figure out what you really want to do. And you mentioned before we went on the air, someone that was in that kind of situation. But let's say you've left and then you made that decision, I want to get back in. There are impediments, but there are also ways in which people can work around this, or that's part of what tell us what SCSEP is.
Okay, SCSEP is the Senior Community Service Employment Program. And it's a grant funded by the Department of Labor. It's part of the Older Americans Act that was established back in 1965. And AARP Foundation is one of the providers for the SCSEP program. Basically, we work with seniors 55 and older, retrain them, and get them back into the workforce. How we do this is we set them up in nonprofits or government-related organizations. At this current time, we put them there for 18 hours a week. We do pay them minimum wage. And that's where they learn to get back into the workforce, learn the soft skills again, showing up on time, every day, working their schedule, good attitude, and working well with other people. A lot of times people have left the workforce for a number of years. When they come back into the workforce, it's an entirely different culture within companies. Now, rather than someone that's their same age as their manager, there's a very young, much younger person now as their manager. And of course, communications have changed also. The other problem that we seem to face with most of our seniors getting back into the force is technology. If you are out of the workforce for a few years, technology has changed. And if you don't keep up with it, you're behind the 8 ball. And a lot of times, some of our people have no computer skills whatsoever, but that's something we train them on.
Let me ask you, you opened up the door there. What would you say is that computer skills or being able to type would be very important?
No, just actually not having a fear of the computer. Today, even in entry-level jobs at a public supermarket or a Target, you have to go in and fill out your application on a computer system.
I've been through
Fill it
that.
out online.
It's
Send
a
your
nightmare.
resume online, and it is. And the thing is, if there's a line behind you, and you're very, very slow, you know,
Let me tell you a story.
The nerves kick up a little bit.
This is too good because I was sort of laid off a couple of years ago at the university, and I qualified for unemployment. So I went over there, and I'm clicking on the machine like this forever, and it wouldn't work because it was a touch screen. I finally realized. So I mean, things have changed.
Yes,
you know?
they do. They have.
I felt sorry though for a lot of people there that had no computer skills whatsoever, and they walked in and they were really and maybe English was their second language.
Right.
And it was really sad to see some of the people that were trying to register for programs or go through training and things like that. But it was really an interesting experience. You know, I finally gave up on it after a few weeks, and I said, "Okay, keep your money." I just, you know, at my age, it didn't matter that much more. But we were going to talk about ways you can get into the labor force. Dr. Karlin mentioned before we went on the air about networking, how important that is, because really, isn't that one of the main ways that people get jobs?
That's probably the best way to find a job is through networking. As we put our people into different community service assignments at what we refer to as host agencies, we only keep them there for a short period of time, up to about 6 months, and then we transfer them to another agency. And this is all a form of networking. We send them out to job fairs and other places that they can put in their application. We have them looking for jobs all the time. In our program, we tell our participants that their job is to find a job, and it's our job to help them.
Marvin, you had some other ideas about how people you know, get discouraged and how people view the labor force. It seems to me that when people are out for a while, they lose a sense of who they are, and their self-esteem goes down.
Yeah, I have an example. It was very dramatic because we had back when I was in Minneapolis, that's where I was born and raised, we had a very successful self-made millionaire businessman, went to the country club. Everybody kind of worshipped, I mean, his word was the law, and people would come up to him for advice. And I mean, he was really the center of focus for literally everybody that was there. And then one week he announced that he was retiring. He was a self-made man. He said, "I've had it. I'm ready to retire." And the next week he came there, and it was like he was in some kind of quarantine. And it blew his mind away. He couldn't understand, why don't people, I mean, I haven't lost all my knowledge, but he was no longer in the game. He was no longer in the game. And so I tell people, you know, retirement is a very big, important decision. And the combination of working as long as you've worked, and the fact that you are going to live probably a lot longer than you might think, forgetting the financial issues, I just tell people, before you just automatically assume, because it's been, we grew up thinking 65 was retirement. I was put into the Social Security system. I mean, that's one of the reasons we're having trouble paying for it now, because
right. People living.
yeah. But I think it's important for them to ask themselves, what next? I think people are much more likely to retire with success if A, they didn't like what they were doing, and B, they're looking forward to something that they can do, even if it's volunteer work. I mean, and oftentimes volunteer work will lead to full-time jobs. I had a friend of mine that always wanted to be a veterinarian, but they weren't. And they went to a shelter. It was one of the non-kill shelters. And they were so enthusiastic, and they actually hired them on as a full-time employee again. So sometimes, your interests, you can volunteer and go into organizations, and they might find room for you. So that's another way in.
There's a tremendous amount of knowledge that seniors have. It's accumulated over all the years that they've worked in these organizations. And the fascinating thing is that we really need that knowledge. We need them to share that knowledge, but it seems as if you're ostracized if you once you retire. In my former position as the head of a major nonprofit around here, I worked with lots of CEOs, and once they're retired, they become like a pariah.
Yeah.
I guess in part it's because no one feels that they're of use to them any longer in their own, for very selfish reasons, their own career path, because they're not in a position where they can make those decisions that would be able to elevate them or give them opportunities. And so they just become like non-entities, non-persons. And I've seen that, and in some ways it's very discouraging, because when I call myself semi-retired, and I've made myself available to other nonprofits around here to share the knowledge that I have. A couple have taken advantage of this information, but there are people like me that walk around with all of this useful information that could really help facilitate many activities in society, and they're not tapped for that reason.
We do an awful lot of coaching because of that reason. People feel they've been out of the workforce and they don't have that confidence in themselves, although they've worked all their lives and have been successful in a lot of situations, but just, for whatever reason, we have to coach them up and get them to understand that they do have that value. And they do have a lot to offer to employers. What
would you say would be one of the most important things to do if you want to get back into the labor force? What are 2 or 3 things that people need to do right away?
Well, the first thing they have to do is they have to know what they are capable of doing. I think, Marvin, you mentioned about you retire the physical side. Let's face it, if you're 65 years old, probably being a mason tender is not what you want to be. So you don't, you list the skills, list what you want to do. Find out what training you need in order to, if nothing else, get into an entry-level position in that type of a job. And then find out who hires for those kind of jobs. And network. Go actually visit these companies. Take a resume, find out who you need to talk to. Market yourself. Learn how to market yourself. There are jobs out there. There's a good number of jobs out there. One of the problems we run into are the skills needed to fulfill those jobs. And a lot of times in the participants we have in our program, we don't have, and again, it's technology skills. But yeah, you have to find out what you want to do, what skills you need to do it, and then how to find
How effective is it to send out resumes? I mean, people tell you they send out 200, 300 of these things, and they get no replies.
Well, that tells you right there.
No, that's not the way to go.
I know there's a black hole out there where all these resumes from all these sites go into. We do get some responses on resumes that are sent online, but very, very few. If you just walk into a place, put your resume online, or fill out the application online. Find out where that company is located, then go visit. Take your resume and say, I want to give you this resume in person. Oh, yeah, but you have to do this online. Well, I already did that. Now, who do I speak with? Be a little bit aggressive.
It may pay off.
Yes.
I think you
yes.
said it was shoe leather shopping. I
Right,
think.
shoe
Yeah.
leather. Use
Yeah.
your shoe leather.
Yeah.
That is the best way. Like I said, there's an underground job market out there. A lot of jobs. If I was a small employer, would I put an ad in the paper?
No.
Never. Because I would be inundated with those 200-300 resumes
Right.
you were just talking about. They'd all be on my fax, my email, and I would have to address each and every one of them or toss some of them away. And so, you know, networking, finding out who has the jobs, and then applying that way.
So people shouldn't get discouraged just because they haven't had a nibble.
It's an 18, it's match play in golf if you're a golfer. One hole matches, you know, just because somebody says no, you still got 17 more holes to go. So you got to keep on going.
Is there some age that you might as well say, well, I'm over the hill and I just should throw in the towel? Or?
We had a gentleman who was hired on his 83rd birthday. He was turned 83 years old. The organization we had him at hired him as a part-time employee.
Interesting.
So
Mindset has a lot to do with it.
Yeah, oh, and
Yeah.
he was. He was a very active, outgoing person.
Marvin, you hinted at, you didn't pick up on this point, but there is something you mentioned that I think we ought to focus on a little bit, and that is the fact that people today could outlive their finances, which is very scary to a lot of elderly people, especially when there's continued talk about the fiscal cliff and the implications of cutting back or changing eligibility ages and things like that. If people live longer than was ever anticipated at the time they passed these entitlement programs, then they ought to reconsider at what time they plan to opt out of the labor force and if they'll have adequate finances. From the research that I've come across, it's indicative that most people don't have private pensions and have not saved enough money for their retirement, and that Social Security alone is insufficient to help them get through.
And they say that just if you can just work 1 or 2 or maybe even 3 years longer than you expected to, it can add 5 to 10 years of extra income for you, you know, down the road. So, yeah, I hate to say that anybody should not retire because they need the money, because that shouldn't, I mean, that causes some dissonance. But the reality of it is, you know, if you're in a job, and we are in a pretty bad job market right now as well. So if you've got a job, you've got health insurance, and let's remember, as you get older, that health insurance is very valuable. We still don't know the long-term impact of Obamacare, so we'll have to stay with what we know right now, and that is if you have a health care area at work and you're covered, you leave your job, and you might be paying $500 to $1,000 a month just to keep your health, you know, insurance intact, and a lot of people forget that. It's just I can't stress how hard it is to be able to make money last 10 years longer than you thought it would. You know, it's rough. And once, as I said, once you're out of the job market, and let's face it, we know this, there is bias, a job bias against the elderly. And when I say the elderly, I say 50 or older. It's kind of like, I was joking around about the AARP, that they could track down somebody on the witness protection program. When you hit 50, you're going to get that envelope.
That's right.
But there are tricky ways we were just talking about. I mean, you're not allowed to ask about age now in interviews, but we were just looking at our Florida license plate, our licenses, and your birth date's right on the license. So if they say, we want your license, which they have a right to ask, I presume, you know, for checking, they know your age. So, you know, the thing is, I guess I'm just saying is, before you let go, hold on and think about it for a while, and think about the ramifications of what's going to happen when you leave your job. And the financial issue is one of the big ones that you have, which is not something one had to consider 20, 30 years ago.
That's right. You were hinting that a lot of the jobs that you place people in are in nonprofits or service or volunteer kinds of positions.
A lot of times the agencies that we place our people in for training, for their training assignments, will hire our people. We also put together a marketing program where we do job clubs. We teach the participants how to market themselves, how to put together scripts to get past the gatekeepers and the administrative assistants and how to get to the right people. In a former life, I worked in the staffing business and search and recruitment. So a lot of the techniques we use in our office are what recruiters would use. Yes, and so we took private industry and applied it to our program, and we've done fairly well with finding people jobs. Now, a lot of the jobs are part-time jobs, but then again, that's what the people want,
Sure.
are part-time jobs also. Do they pay a lot? You know, $8, $10, $12 an hour, basically. But I was telling you about one gentleman who complained constantly about age discrimination, and at interviews he would complain about age discrimination, and we finally coached him on that, and he got a full-time job at $40,000 a year, which was fine. When he finally learned how to interview, he got hired because he did have the skills.
How do people qualify to get into your program?
Okay, our program, first of all, you have to be 55 or older. You don't have to be a member of AARP. A lot of people will call up and say, well, I'm a member. Well, this is open to everybody. You have to qualify income-wise. You have to be of low income or poverty level. About 92% of our people are poverty level.
Okay.
And then you have residency requirements. For my office in St. Petersburg, you have to live south of Almerton Road, but we also have an office here in Hillsborough County. We have one in Palm Harbor also. So, but that's it: age, income, and residency.
Do you have many people in the program?
Nationwide, at any one time, this was probably the last grant year that we had. At any one time, about 6,500 people in the program nationwide. We have about approximately 70 offices. Some of them have big satellite offices. Myself, I'm in St. Petersburg, and I also cover Manatee County. We probably last year, we had a 200 and some % service rate, which means that we service twice as many people as we had funding for. Because we bring them in, get them a job. Once you get a job, you're out of the program. You cannot be employed and be in the program.
Do you subsidize people when they're in training, or?
Yes, they receive minimum wage. We have a few other things that we do. We have specialized training. I was just at P-TECH, and I'm trying to put together an institutional culinary program where we train people.
They used to have one there.
Yeah, well, they have one, but for our seniors, because working on the line, doing 100 meals an hour may not be what our people are capable of doing, but putting together cafeterias or hospitals and things like that. We get forklift training, computer training. We just finished training a CNA, and she's preparing to take her test.
That's nursing.
Nursing,
right.
Certified nursing
I was going to ask you about that. That's really the hottest area, isn't it? Healthcare.
Yes, it is very hot area. Home companions, homemaker companions, where you go into. I think the health industry is trying to keep people in their homes as long as they can. So a lot of times now you have the companions that'll come in and do some light housekeeping, prepare a few meals, run to the store, to the pharmacy, pick up your medications and all. And that is a very hot job market right now.
Doesn't pay all that much.
Doesn't pay a lot, but you know what? It keeps you busy and active.
And it can be very rewarding.
Right, yeah. I mean, I can tell, I've been through that from when my mom was, was in need. And my father-in-law, who's going to be 93 in about 2 weeks, and he has a companion. Mm-hmm. And I know that it costs a lot, but the money doesn't go to the person providing the care.
The agencies.
Yeah, the agency does it. But it's a very necessary kind of service.
Yes,
and it's not easy to get qualified people. If you can drive, that is a real asset.
That's the key.
On that one.
Transportation is a...
And if you're personable, my mother used to say, well, yeah, I mean, she'd go through them one after the other, and she said, they can't talk. I said, well, you're not going to get a college graduate to come in here and keep tabs on you all day. It's just a reality,
Well, the agencies that provide the companions like the senior citizens, because most of the people that they service are senior citizens also. And you have a lot of you know, people, the communications, they've been through the same things, the same eras, same music, same TV, movies, the whole thing. So
that's a
there's
show
lot in
that we may
common.
do. My wife, that's what my wife does. She works with the elderly, and so I think we'll talk about that maybe in the future. But that is an area. So there, you know, I mean, the basic thing is that there are jobs out there.
Yes, there are.
And you have to figure out what your skill sets are, and then see whether or not there's a match. And that the basic approach that a lot of people have that is sending out their resumes indiscriminately is not going to really land them a position. No. You know, Marvin said that it's networking. You're talking about maybe going to work for an agency as a volunteer, and then you develop your credibility and demonstrate your worth to the organization that way. And it's basically keeping an open mind and being willing to get into areas that you like. Maybe come up with your own bucket list of wanting to do something, and not being necessarily interested in it for the monetary outcome, but for the psychological.
Yeah, that's one thing I'd like to say on that too, is I've studied aging. One of the great accelerants of aging is boredom. And a lot of people who retire suddenly have nothing left to do. One of the greatest ways to allay your boredom is to go and volunteer and help other people. And if you have the money, especially, and you don't need the money, that's a wonderful way to I mean, it's a great thing all the way around. It's a win-win for everybody.
Right. Well,
with the and piggybacking on that, with the number of grants that have been stopped and slowed down and cut back, so many organizations do need volunteers.
Right. Well, and I certainly worked in an organization where we use volunteers. Sometimes the organizations don't know what to do with the volunteers, and that's another issue. But I want to thank you both for being here today, Dr. Marvin Karlin from USF and Bob Yakubisin.
Yakubisin.
Yeah, I got it from AARP, the Foundation for SCSEP. And it was very useful, and I hope that our viewers have gathered important information today. And I want to thank them for watching, and if you'd like to have more information about this, or you'd like to become a producer, you could come to our station here at the mall, and we'll teach you how to do this. There are classes going on all the time, and you could become a producer in your own right, learn how everything works behind the scenes. So thank you very much, and we'll look forward to having you view our next program. Thank you.
Getting health information is a nightmare.
It's all in how you look at it. To you, it's a pile of books and reading until your eyes drop out. But to me, I go straight to NIHSeniorHealth.gov, click on what I want, and boom, there it is.
NIHSeniorHealth.gov, the medical website created with older adults in mind by the National Institutes of Health.
Getting health information at our age is tough.
Yeah, it's all how you look at it. To you, it's a pile of books and reading till your eyes drop out. But me, I go to NIHSeniorHealth.gov, click on what I want, and bingo, there it is.
Well, thanks for the tip.
NIHSeniorHealth.gov. It's easy to use. You can make the text bigger, make the contrast better, even make it talk to you. If only everything else out there were senior friendly. NIHSeniorHealth.gov, built with you in mind.